Hey there, it's me Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description.
Martha sat cross-legged on the bed, her fingers absent-mindedly toying with the hem of the dress. It was strange how quickly everything had shifted. An hour ago, she had been Martin, just a boy with a secret. Now, she was sitting here, her nails painted, her lips glossy, her name spoken aloud like it had always belonged to her. And the scariest part? It felt like it had. Michelle flopped onto her stomach beside her, propping her chin up with her hands. "So," she said, dragging out the word. "What now?" Martha frowned. "What do you mean?" Michelle smirked. "Well, you're all dressed up, looking fabulous, and we've already done the fashion show. What else do girls do at sleepovers?" Sleepover. The word sent a jolt through Martha's spine. This did feel like one, didn't it? Except it wasn't. Because boys didn't have sleepovers like this. Because boys weren't supposed to feel the way she was feeling right now. Michelle tapped a finger against her lips, thinking, "Oh, I know." She rolled over, grabbed her purse, and pulled out a small plastic package. Martha squinted. "What's that?" Michelle grinned. "Face masks." Martha blinked. "Face masks." "Yep." Michelle sat up, ripping one open. "You've never done one before?" Martha shook her head. "Well, you're in for a treat." Michelle peeled the mask from the package, revealing a thin, gel-like sheet. "Hold still." Martha instinctively flinched as Michelle placed the cool mask against her skin. It felt strange, sticky, wet, but oddly soothing. Michelle adjusted it so it sat perfectly, then grabbed another one for herself. "Okay, now we just let them sit for a while. It makes your skin all soft and pretty." Martha stared at her reflection in the mirror. It was ridiculous, really, her in a pink dress, lip gloss shimmering, her nails painted, and now this. She looked like any other girl at a sleepover. The thought made her stomach flip. She turned to Michelle, her voice quiet. "Have you done this before? With other girls?" Michelle nodded. "Duh. Me, Brenda, and Janet used to do this all the time." Martha swallowed. "So, this is normal?" Michelle gave her a look. "Of course it's normal." Martha exhaled slowly. Normal. She had never thought of it like that before. Wearing a dress, doing makeup, sitting around with a friend talking about nonsense. These weren't things that felt normal for Martin. But they did feel normal for Martha. Michelle nudged her. "Hey, what's up? You got that thinking too much face again." Martha hesitated. "I don't know." Michelle smirked. "You do know. You're just scared to say it." Martha's throat tightened. How was it possible that Michelle understood her better than she understood herself? She bit her lip. I like this." Michelle nodded, unsurprised. "Of course you do." Martha turned toward her. "You don't think this is weird?" Michelle gave her an exasperated look. For the millionth time, no. "Martha, listen to me." She grabbed her hands, squeezing them gently. "This isn't wrong. You aren't wrong." Martha's breath hitched. It was such a simple thing to say. But hearing it, really hearing it, made her chest feel impossibly light. "Say it," Michelle urged. Martha swallowed. "Say what?" "Say you're not wrong." Martha's fingers twitched. Her entire life, she had felt wrong. Like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot, like a word misspelled over and over again. But now, maybe, she wasn't. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "I'm not wrong." Michelle grinned. "There you go." Martha let the words settle. No, she wasn't wrong. She was Martha. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to admit it. The room felt quieter now, but it wasn't the awkward silence of uncertainty. It was something softer, something warmer, like the kind of silence that comes when everything feels right. Martha sat perfectly still, letting the weight of her own words settle over her. "I'm not wrong." She had never spoken those words before, not like that. Not in a way that felt real. Michelle lay sprawled on the bed beside her, flipping lazily through a magazine, her face mask still sticking to her skin. "So, she said casually, "Now that you've officially accepted how fabulous you are, what's next?" Martha blinked. "What do you mean?" Michelle smirked, tossing the magazine aside. "I mean, what are you gonna do about it?" Martha hesitated. "Do about it?" "Yeah," Michelle said, stretching. "Like, are you just gonna pretend this never happened? Go back to being Martin tomorrow? Or are you gonna be Martha?" The question hit her like a punch to the chest. She had been so focused on the moment, on the feeling of the dress, the gloss on her lips, the way her name rolled off Michelle's tongue like it had always belonged to her, that she hadn't let herself think about after. Because after was terrifying. Martha bit her lip, fingers curling into the folds of the dress. "I don't know." Michelle sighed dramatically. "You do know. You're just scared to admit it." Martha exhaled. "Maybe." Michelle sat up, peeling the mask from her face and tossing it into the trash. "Look, I get it. It's big. It's scary. But you have to ask yourself, was tonight just a one-time thing? Or is this who you are?" Martha's stomach twisted. Was it a one-time thing? Could she really just wake up tomorrow and pretend none of this ever happened? Go back to being Martin? Go back to wearing the clothes that never felt right? Go back to being the person everyone expected her to be? The answer was immediate. No, she couldn't. Because that person wasn't real. But saying that out loud? Admitting it? That was something else entirely. Michelle must have noticed the look on her face because she smiled, softer this time. "You don't have to decide everything tonight, Martha. But if this is you, then you owe it to yourself to figure out what that means." Martha swallowed. "And if it is me?" Michelle shrugged. "Then you take it one step at a time. You don't have to tell anyone right away. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But you don't have to hide from yourself either." Martha nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. One step at a time. Maybe she didn't have to figure out everything tonight. But she could make one decision. She looked down at herself, the dress, the nails, the shimmer of gloss on her lips. And then she whispered, "I want to stay like this. Just for tonight." Michelle's smile widened. "Then tonight, you're Martha." And for the first time in her life, that was enough. Martha stretched out on the bed, sinking into the moment, letting it wrap around her like a warm blanket. The thought of changing back into Martin's clothes, of scrubbing away the gloss, of stripping off the dress, felt like a distant problem, one she didn't want to think about yet. Not tonight. Tonight, she was Martha. Michelle grinned, clearly satisfied with how things had turned out. "You know," she mused, "if you're gonna stay like this for the night, we might as well go all in." Martha raised an eyebrow. "All in?" Michelle's smirk widened. "Makeover round 2. Martha's heart fluttered. The first makeover had been overwhelming in the best way, exciting, terrifying, thrilling. But now that she was past the initial shock, she realized something unexpected. She wanted more. "What else is there to do?" Martha asked, trying to sound casual even as anticipation buzzed beneath her skin. Michelle gasped, clutching her chest dramatically. "Oh, Martha, sweetie, so much more." She hopped off the bed, eyes scanning Brenda's room like a scavenger on a treasure hunt. Martha sat up, watching as Michelle rifled through drawers, opened the closet, and dug through Brenda's accessories like she owned the place. Michelle declared, pulling out a white satin nightgown. She turned to Martha, wiggling her eyebrows. Martha's face burned. "What?" Michelle held the nightgown out. "If you're staying Martha for the night, you can't sleep in that." She gestured at the dress. "You need something appropriate." Martha's stomach flipped. The dress had been one thing, but the idea of changing into a nightgown, of truly committing to this, even in sleep, felt bigger, scarier, more real. Michelle must have sensed the hesitation. "You don't have to," she said, tilting her head. "But I think you'd like it." Martha stared at the fabric, her fingers twitching at her sides. Would she? The answer came before she even had time to fully process it. "Okay." Michelle beamed. "Knew you'd say yes." She handed over the nightgown and gestured toward the bathroom. "Go ahead. I'll wait." Martha hesitated for only a moment before sliding off the bed. She walked to the bathroom, her heart pounding louder with every step. Once inside, She shut the door and leaned against it, inhaling deeply. She caught her reflection in the mirror. A girl stared back at her. It still startled her, how natural it looked, how right it felt. She reached for the zipper on the dress, her hands shaking slightly. As she pulled it down, the cool air met her skin, sending goosebumps across her arms. Then she slipped into the nightgown. The fabric was soft. Softer than she expected. It slid over her body like it belonged there, brushing gently against her legs. Martha's breath hitched. She turned back to the mirror. The transformation was complete. She wasn't just dressed up anymore. She wasn't pretending. She was Martha. A knock at the door. "You good in there?" Martha swallowed and opened the door. Michelle's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Oh, my God." Martha shifted nervously. "What?" "You look adorable." Martha rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed at the compliment. Michelle grabbed her hands and twirled her around. "See? I told you you'd love it." Martha laughed, the sound bubbling up naturally. She did love it. She just wasn't ready to admit why yet. Not to Michelle. Not to herself. Not yet. But she had time. For tonight, this was enough. Martha curled up on the bed, hugging a pillow to her chest. The nightgown settled against her skin like a whisper, soft and delicate, unlike anything she had ever worn before. Every movement felt new, every shift of fabric, every gentle brush of silk against her legs. Michelle sat beside her, legs crossed, absent-mindedly twirling a strand of her blonde hair. "So," she said, grinning, "how does it feel?" Martha hesitated. She knew what Michelle was asking, but putting it into words felt impossible. Like asking a fish to explain water. She sighed, squeezing the pillow tighter. "It feels different." Michelle smirked. "Good different." Martha swallowed. "Yeah." She didn't know why admitting it felt so big. Like she had crossed some invisible line she could never uncross. Michelle nudged her shoulder. "Told you." Martha smiled, but a knot twisted in her stomach. She had never thought about the after. Tomorrow, she'd wake up. The nail polish would have to come off. The lip gloss would fade. The nightgown would go back in Brenda's drawer, and she'd have to slip back into the role of Martin. The thought made her chest tighten. Michelle must have noticed because she leaned in. "Hey," she said gently, "what's going on in that pretty little head of yours?" Martha hesitated, then mumbled, "What happens after tonight?" Michelle's playful smirk faded. For the first time, she didn't have a quick answer. She sighed, tucking her legs under her. "I don't know," she admitted. "That's up to you." Martha swallowed hard. "But what if I can't do this? What if? What if what?" Michelle pressed. Martha bit her lip. "What if I have to go back to being Martin?" The words felt wrong coming out of her mouth. Like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. Michelle studied her for a long moment, then reached out, squeezing her hand. "Listen to me," she said, voice steady. "No one can take this away from you. Not your parents. Not your sister. Not anyone." Martha's throat tightened. "But what if they find out?" Michelle exhaled. "Then you deal with it when it happens. But you don't have to figure it all out tonight." Martha looked down at their joined hands, at the soft pink of her nails against Michelle's skin. She nodded. "One step at a time." Michelle smiled. "For now, let's just enjoy the night. No stress. No worries." Martha took a deep breath. Just the night. Just Martha. For now, that was enough. The clock on the nightstand ticked softly, marking the slow passage of time. Martha lay on her stomach, her legs bent at the knees, her feet lazily swinging back and forth. The satin nightgown moved with her, brushing gently against her skin, a constant reminder that tonight was real, that she was real. Michelle flopped onto her side, propping her head up with one hand. "So, Miss Martha," she said teasingly, "what's next on our sleepover itinerary?" Martha let out a small laugh. "Sleepover itinerary?" "Yeah." Michelle grinned. "We've done the fashion show, the makeover, the face masks. What else do girls do at sleepovers?" Martha hesitated. She shouldn't know the answer. She had never been invited to the kind of sleepovers Brenda had with her friends, but she did know because she had watched. She had always watched from the sidelines, listening to their laughter, their whispered conversations, their secrets traded in the quiet hours of the night. And now, she was here. She swallowed. Well, don't girls usually talk about, stuff? Michelle wiggled her eyebrows. Stuff? Martha's face burned. You know, stuff. Michelle smirked. Oh, you mean boys? Martha's stomach flipped. Relax, Michelle said, laughing. I won't make you spill all your secret crushes. Not yet, anyway. Martha fidgeted. What if I don't have any? Michelle blinked. Like, none at all? Martha hesitated. I don't know. I never really thought about it. Michelle tilted her head. Huh, interesting. Martha bit her lip. Is that weird? Michelle shrugged. Not really. Some girls don't get all swoony over boys. Some only like girls. And some just haven't figured it out yet. Martha exhaled, relieved that Michelle didn't push the topic. Okay, no boy talk then, Michelle said, stretching. How about scary stories? Martha's lips twitched. Scary stories? Obviously. It's a sleepover classic. Martha giggled. Okay, you first. Michelle grinned, wiggling her fingers like a cartoon villain. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. She launched into a dramatic retelling of some urban legend about a ghost girl who haunted a summer camp, complete with exaggerated voices and over-the-top hand gestures. Martha laughed more than she shivered, but she still hugged her pillow a little tighter by the time Michelle finished. When it was Martha's turn, she hesitated. She had never told a scary story before. But tonight, she wasn't Martin, the quiet boy who watched from the sidelines. She was Martha. So she sat up a little straighter, squared her shoulders, and started weaving a tale. Michelle listened intently, nodding along, her expression shifting at all the right moments. And when Martha reached the end, her voice just a little breathy from excitement, Michelle clapped. Okay, wow, she said. That was good. Martha beamed. Michelle smiled, nudging her playfully. See? You fit in just fine at a sleepover. Martha's heart swelled. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. Like she wasn't just pretending to be one of the girls. She was one of the girls. And she never wanted this night to end. Martha lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart still fluttering from the rush of telling her first ever scary story. It was such a small thing, really, just words, just a silly moment between friends. But to her, it had felt like everything. She wasn't the boy who had to sit in the background, watching others have fun. She wasn't the outsider who longed to be part of something she could never have. She was part of it now. A real sleepover. A real friend who saw her, who knew her. And she never wanted this moment to end. Michelle stretched beside her, yawning. Okay, Martha, I gotta say, this has been one of my best babysitting nights ever. Martha turned her head toward her. Really? Duh. Michelle grinned. Way better than just watching TV while you sit around doing nothing. This was fun. Martha smiled, warmth filling her chest. Fun. That was another word that had never quite fit her life before. Hey, Michelle said, nudging her lightly. So, do you think you'll ever do this again? Martha tensed. The night had felt perfect, almost too perfect, like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. But tomorrow would come. And when it did, she would have to take off the nightgown, scrub away the nail polish, and put Martin's clothes back on. And that thought made her heart sink. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Michelle studied her for a moment, then rolled onto her side, propping herself up on one elbow. Martha. Martha swallowed. Yeah? Michelle hesitated, then smiled. No matter what happens tomorrow, this, tonight, is real. Martha felt her chest tighten. I know, she whispered. Michelle smirked. And if you do ever want to do this again, I'll be here. Martha's breath caught. You mean that? Of course. Michelle grinned. Someone's gotta teach you all the tricks of being a girl, right? Martha let out a shaky laugh. And in that moment, she realized something. Maybe this wasn't just for tonight. Maybe she didn't have to leave Martha behind. Maybe, just maybe, Martha was here to stay. The glow from the bedside lamp cast soft shadows along the walls, making the room feel cozy, almost unreal, like a place outside of time, where nothing existed except the two of them. Martha hugged her pillow, feeling the silkiness of her nightgown against her skin, the warmth of the moment wrapping around her like a cocoon. Michelle yawned dramatically, stretching her arms over her head. "All right, princess, I think it's about that time." Martha blinked. "Time for what?" Michelle smirked. "Bed, duh." Martha's stomach twisted. Bed meant the night would end. She glanced at the clock. It was already late, much later than she had realized. But she wasn't tired. Or at least, she didn't want to be tired. Because as soon as she closed her eyes, morning would come. And then what? She'd wake up, and reality would come crashing down. Would she still feel like Martha? Would she still be Martha? Michelle must have seen the hesitation on her face because she nudged her lightly. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay." Martha swallowed hard. "I just don't want this to end." Michelle tilted her head. "Why does it have to?" Martha opened her mouth, but no words came. Why did it have to end? Because that's how it always went. Because playing dress-up had rules. Because pretending had a time limit. Because eventually, she had to go back to who she really was. But wasn't this who she really was? Michelle gave her a knowing look. "You can still be Martha tomorrow, you know." Martha's chest tightened. "But what if?" One step at a time, Michelle interrupted gently. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight." Martha exhaled shakily. "One step at a time." That's what Michelle kept saying. And she was right. Tomorrow would come. And when it did, she would deal with it. But for tonight, she was Martha. And that was enough. Michelle turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into soft darkness. "Good night, Martha." Martha smiled, curling up beneath the covers. "Good night, Michelle." And for the first time in her life, she fell asleep feeling whole. Morning came too soon. Martha stirred beneath the covers, the warmth of sleep still clinging to her. For a moment, everything was perfect, soft fabric against her skin, the faint scent of vanilla from Brenda's lotion still lingering in the air. Then reality pressed in. Her eyes fluttered open, and the first thing she saw was the pale pink of her nails. Her breath caught. It hadn't been a dream. She was still Martha. Her heart pounded as she sat up, the silky nightgown pooling around her. Michelle was still asleep beside her, sprawled out in a way that somehow made her look both graceful and ridiculous at the same time. Martha swallowed hard. The night had been perfect. But now the sun was up. And what happened now? She glanced at the bedroom door, anxiety twisting in her stomach. Her parents could be home already. What if her mother came to wake her up? What if Brenda walked in? Would they see her? Would they recognize her? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Carefully, she slid out of bed, moving as quietly as possible. The room was still dim, the morning light barely creeping in through the curtains. She padded over to the mirror, hesitant but unable to stop herself. Her reflection stared back at her. The mascara was smudged slightly, but her eyes still looked big and bright. Her lips had lost some of their gloss, but there was still a faint shine to them. And the nightgown. It didn't feel like a costume. It didn't feel like pretend. It just felt right. She reached up, touching the fabric at her collarbone. Who am I now? The question echoed in her mind, terrifying and thrilling at the same time. What time is it? Martha whirled around. Michelle was stretching, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Then she saw Martha standing there in the nightgown, staring at herself. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "You're still her," Michelle said, her voice thick with sleep. Martha swallowed hard. I don't know what to do." Michelle sat up, yawning. "What do you want to do?" Martha hesitated. "I don't want to change back." Michelle's smile softened. "Then don't." Martha's stomach twisted. "But my parents." Michelle waved a hand. "Okay, yeah, you probably can't walk downstairs in that. Yet. But you can take your time." Martha bit her lip. "How?" Michelle smirked. Well, for starters, we have to get that nail polish off before anyone sees. Unless you want to explain why Martin suddenly has a fabulous manicure. Martha's face burned. Right. Yeah. Good idea. Michelle hopped out of bed and dug into her purse, pulling out a small bottle of nail polish remover. Here, sit, she said, plopping back onto the bed and patting the spot beside her. Martha hesitated, glancing at her nails one last time before sitting down. Michelle unscrewed the cap and started working on her left hand, the strong scent of remover filling the air. You don't have to erase everything, Michelle said casually. Just enough to stay under the radar. Martha nodded, watching as the pink polish disappeared, leaving behind her bare nails. A part of her hated seeing it go. When Michelle finished, she held up Martha's hand, inspecting it. There. No evidence. Martha flexed her fingers. It wasn't the same. But the feeling hadn't left her. She was still Martha. Michelle stretched again. All right, time to change before anyone. A sudden noise from downstairs made both of them freeze. Martha's blood ran cold. Footsteps. The front door closing. Her parents were home. Michelle's eyes went wide. Okay, no need to panic. Just. Too late. A voice drifted up the stairs. Martin? You awake? Martha's heart nearly stopped. Michelle grabbed her shoulders. Breathe, she whispered. You got this. Martha could barely think, barely move. The nightgown, the makeup, the sheer impossibility of explaining any of this. Martin. The footsteps grew louder. She only had seconds. And she had no idea what to do. Martha's heart pounded so hard she thought it might shake the walls. The footsteps were getting closer. Her mother's voice was gentle, but it felt like a warning, like a countdown to something she wasn't ready for. Martin. Michelle reacted first. She grabbed Martha's arm and hissed, bathroom. Now. Martha didn't think. She moved. Her bare feet barely made a sound against the carpet as she scrambled into the bathroom, closing the door just as she heard her mother reach the top of the stairs. She pressed her back against the door, her breath shallow, heart racing. This was bad. This was really bad. Michelle, still in the bedroom, answered casually, her voice smooth as silk. Oh hey, Mrs. Murphy. Martha squeezed her eyes shut. Michelle, please be cool. Oh, hi, Michelle, her mother replied, sounding surprised. I didn't realize you were still here. Is Martin up? Michelle hesitated for only half a second before answering. Kind of. He's in the bathroom. Probably just waking up. Martha exhaled sharply, gripping the fabric of the nightgown. Thank you, Michelle. Her mother chuckled. Well, tell him to come down for breakfast when he's ready. Martha barely heard Michelle's response before the footsteps faded down the stairs. Silence. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. A few seconds later, Michelle knocked softly on the bathroom door. You still alive in there? Martha groaned. Barely. Michelle slipped inside, closing the door behind her. Crisis averted for now. Martha looked down at herself. The makeup. The silky nightgown. The way her body felt right, but completely out of place in the world she had to step back into. What do I do? She whispered. Michelle sighed. You get changed. You wash your face. You blend for now. Martha swallowed hard. But I don't want to. Michelle met her eyes. I know. Martha bit her lip. She had never wanted anything more than to stay as she was right now. To walk downstairs as Martha. To never have to wear Martin's clothes again. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. Michelle reached out and squeezed her hand. This doesn't go away just because you take the nightgown off. Martha's throat tightened. It feels like it will. Michelle shook her head. You're still you. No matter what you wear. Martha looked down. The thought of putting Martin's clothes back on made her chest ache. But for now, she had no choice. One step at a time. She nodded slowly. Okay. Michelle squeezed her hand one more time before grabbing the doorknob. I'll go keep your mom distracted. Take your time. Martha watched her leave, then turned to the mirror. One last look. One last moment before she had to become someone else again. But as she reached for Martin's clothes, she realized something. She wasn't becoming someone else. She had always been Martha. And no amount of hiding would change that.
Please subscribe my channel for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.